Pete Yost here for the Unbuild It podcast with a word about our sponsor, Huber Engineered Woods. There are really three reasons why I think Huber Engineered Woods stands out, and it's a big part of why they're a sponsor of our Unbuild It podcast. First, they develop systems of products. The products are compatible and integrated. Makes our jobs a lot more easy in the field and when specifying. Second is superior tech support. There are really good website resources that they have developed for the application of their products, but they also have an outstanding 800 numbered tech team that really knows their stuff. And the last is a really active technical research and development team with whom I've done a lot of work over the years, and I have a lot of faith in the information I get from them when I have questions about product performance. So that's it. That's our high performance sponsor. Now on to the podcast.
Well, hello, Unbuild It podcast. Hello, Jake.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Peter.
Hey, Steve.
And hello to everyone. I'm bringing everybody in today.
You're all
the
inclusive.
Building industry. We are all inclusive. Everybody's invited today.
I like it.
All right, good. So,
Kiss ass.
call me what you will. I've been called a lot worse, so it doesn't bother me. Where are we today? Today is 4 of 4.
Last but not least, or maybe last and least.
Yep, the
Yeah.
least.
And least, last but least, of our little series here, mini-series of love and hate. And this week, we're talking thermal control. So let's dive right in. Pete, love, hate, and what is it? Thermal control. Lay it on me.
Thermal control. So we just mentioned that we said last and least. Probably my biggest, hate's a pretty strong term, but it's generally what gets focused on first and most. And actually in our order of priority, it's least and last. So that's pretty frustrating. I don't know. Certainly when I was a builder starting off, I thought that, hey, when you insulate, you're done. Isn't that the way you improve the performance of a building? And I would venture to say that almost everybody in the building industry, except Steve, started with that focus on, thermal management first as the most important and the best one to focus on.
Well, it's interesting when you ask somebody about their house or when they talk about performance, the one thing...
Oh, we have our such and such walls. Right?
That's where
I know.
I was going.
I know.
But go ahead. Might as well finish my thought.
No, that's what they do. They interrupt you and say, I have our...
Oh, so
I have our
role-playing. You were role-playing.
We have our 30 walls.
I thought you were just being very insulting, but you were actually role-playing.
No.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I follow along. But yeah, it is interesting when you talk about anybody talks about their particular performance on a house. The very first thing is, well, yeah, we build our 40 walls. Okay. Air tightness doesn't really count, or we build a really good water managed house. You never hear that. But you hear our 40 walls, or we always do our 60 ceilings, or...
Do you think that that's... I think that there's two reasons that is. Number one, we all thought it was super important for so long. Like it was the most important for so long. Sure. And number two, it's a very easy quotable metric. It's a very easy, my R13 stacks up against your R21 metric that everybody can just latch into.
I'm going way back in the Wayback Machine.
Okay.
And I would say we've grown to understand thermal control as a means to keep warm when it's really cool out, because death can ensue should we not stay warm. So the idea of shelter was most likely, I don't think anybody 2,000 years ago was saying, hey, let's build a shelter here so I can get out of the sun or stay cool. Now, they might have come to realize that, but I think the idea of shelter, when people say, oh, let's build a shelter or something. It's to get out of the weather, but more so to get warm.
Man, this is a cold climate guy talking,
Yes,
right?
it is.
Yeah, but that's, okay. Maybe
people
somebody in
moved from
Texas,
warm latitudes to cold latitudes.
yes, and maybe, there's somebody in Texas or Arizona that says, oh, I don't understand that because that's all they knew for the last 30 years they lived in Arizona. But my point is, historically, I think the idea of shelter is to get warm, like move in a cave, build a fire.
Yeah, there was certainly more consequence in cold climate for a long time.
Move into a cave to get shelter from the sun.
Yeah, but not, I don't know. But there's not that's a comfort, not a, or I die kind of consequence.
Now, that's really interesting because we think of thermal all in terms of energy efficiency, but it doesn't really matter how energy efficient a building is if people are uncomfortable.
Right.
So that's a big part of this continuous control air.
I think that just has evolved that how do I measure thermal comfort, R value, and it's something that it's a number that we're always fascinated with numbers, right? When we're measuring something. So like I know the difference between R40 and R20. R40 is a better wall.
Mm-hmm.
Now it might not be
almost
because
double.
of air tightness, right? It might not be because of air tightness or some other issues, but it's something that we can hang our hat on, I think. So, yeah, I would tend to agree.
And this is the one layer that we know we can completely tune to climate. That
Yeah, if it's always 75 degrees outside your house, you're not going to need as much insulation as if it's 130 or negative 40.
And pretty much the other three control layers that we've been talking about, they're very important, or at least important, regardless of climate. Whereas this one, it's really dependent on how much different it is than the ASHRAE standard 55 thermal comfort zone, which is related to relative humidity and temperature, but it's a pretty narrow band. But we have climates where, 90% of the hours in the year, you don't need to cool or heat.
But again, it's tied to comfort, right? Because you hear people say, oh, it's really hot outside or it's really cold outside. You never hear people say, man, I got really wet walking in the rain, right? or I just got lightly, drizzled on. Or whatever. Occasionally I guess you hear those comments, but it's not like, man, it's hot outside or it's cold outside. We like to think of our comfort levels in insulating value. So
there's a weird intersection there, though, because people do go, man, it's super humid out, or it's very dry out.
But but that's tied to comfort and I would say temperature in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not. People that complain about humidity aren't complaining necessarily. Well, I guess you could complain about it in Boston or Minneapolis in August because it is the same as New Orleans in Boston in mid-August. But, I don't know how people live in those places anyways. But anyways.
Me either.
There are plenty of people that would look at where we live and say, man, how do they put up with those winters? That's nuts.
Well, when I was in Canada last week, we had a guy from England with us, Adam. And we were just talking, and he said, he was asking questions about, hey, the Northeast. So, like, what are your dangers there? Like, out west they have wildfires. Down south they have hurricanes, and all of that. And I was like, the Northeast, we're pretty safe. We get a bad thunderstorm. We've had history of a tornado or two coming through.
Well, if you look at seismic, wind events, rain events, what are the big natural disasters? I think
wildfire,
New England. Yeah, we really get minor versions of each of those.
Yeah, we get a taste of them every now and then. New England has had earthquakes and all this, and wind events, but we've never had a hurricane or tornado rip through Boston. Right, we're pretty fortunate in that regard. But anyways, we're supposed to be talking about thermal insulation and the pros and cons, and we'll start.
The love and the hate.
The love and hate, yes, love and hate, not pros and cons. So, Pete, thermal insulation, a love and or a hate?
Yeah. So, love. So I'm going to go back to Joe Stiebrick and the idea of a perfect wall, which is the best place to put all of your insulation, regardless of climate, is on the outside of the building. And when you think about it, if your walls and your roof are experiencing pretty much the same conditions you are, everybody's happy. Your building's happy and your occupants are happy. The only problem is that's probably one of the most expensive places to put all the insulation. And so why do we put...
So does that make this also your hate?
Well, no, I've got more hate to spread around. So, you know, we only put insulation in cavities because it's easy and cheap, but it leads to a lot of complications. Now, you know, in Europe, how do they insulate buildings? Well, if you're insulating masonry buildings, you don't have a lot of cavity insulation options.
No.
It's either on the inside of that assembly or the outside, regardless of cost, because you just can't. If it's a solid masonry wall, yeah, exactly. So it's light frame cavity construction that opens up this can of worms in terms of thermal gradients across materials and, you know, first condensing surfaces. None of that stuff pops up if all the insulation's on the outside, regardless of climate. So we love that approach, but we rarely get to do it because we need to, you know, control cost.
Or, yeah, we need to control cost, or we choose to engineer cost is probably how I would.
We value engineer.
Yeah. All right, Jake.
Okay.
Love or hate?
So I'll stick with the love theme, but you'll see that my love and hate actually contradict each other quite well. My love is that it's incredibly easy. When we look at the skilled trades that we have on job sites, most times the guys doing our insulation work are some of the least skilled, least trained, and they're able to execute. It's my grandfather would always call this sort of thing idiot proof. It's idiot proof. If you pay attention for 2 minutes, you can do this, is what he would say. If you'll pay attention to me for 2 minutes, you'll understand this. And I think that that's a great opportunity for success in our industry. That if something is simplistic and repeatable and has a system that is able to be executed, that's a great opportunity for success. When we look at the other topics in this 4-part series, air, water, thermal, they're much more challenging topics than managing
air, water, vapor.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is pretty straightforward. Although I have seen it get complicated for some people in details. They choose to make it crazy.
Well, so the quality control system we have for air tightness is, or for water control, is a performance test. Spray it with water or use a blower door. A really good performance tool for thermal insulation, of course, is an infrared camera.
I thought you were going to say live in it.
Oh, that was my love.
Well, that was a perfect lead-in.
That's your segue then. Jump to it, man.
My love
Trust but verify.
Just how freaking cool a thermal camera is. Right? Like when you see the pictures of Bigfoot walking through the forest and he's highlighted in the infrared image, that is pretty wild. You said Bigfoot doesn't exist.
I saw something the other day that said, what if?
I just asked you a question.
I know, I'm answering. Okay. What if? And just stick with me here. What if Bigfoot's actually blurry in real life? Because all the pictures of Bigfoot are blurry. And I was just like, that's hilarious, actually. I don't even remember where I saw it. But I was just like, man, that's quite clever.
That could be.
And I didn't say Bigfoot.
It would also be pretty cool if Bigfoot's vision was blurry. He's like, well, isn't that how the world is? I'm looking at it from Bigfoot's perspective, which is a bit of a twist.
It is. That's a stretch.
Walk a mile in someone else's shoes.
Bigfoot's. But yeah, I mean, the idea that we can physically see thermal action, I think is very intriguing. Plus, it's pretty cool colors. It's easy to understand. They're very intriguing. Northern Built Pro I don't know if he's got you. I know you didn't see it, but did you see the post that he did where like he can actually do movie camera? Like movies.
He films the IR.
Thermal IR.
He's talking about Randy Williams.
Right.
When he says
Randy
Northern
Williams.
Built.
Oh, yeah.
He's using Instagram handles, and Pete only operates with real names.
Yeah.
Real names. So
Thank you, Jake.
I knew you'd know who he's talking about. You just didn't.
I didn't.
But I think that and you know, the fun part of thermal cameras is you get to ghostwrite stuff on the wall, which is pretty cool.
True.
So you can have some fun with the thermal camera. But yeah, I just think it's really cool to be able to that kind of have that measuring tool and see what's going on inside a wall.
And we have to be careful that it can be misleading. Those colors without a scale,
That's
with
true
different
for the
material
information, but
types, things like that. That's one that like I always see as misleading. People are like, "Oh, well, that spot's really hot." Well, that spot is 2 degrees warmer than everything
Well,
else.
I
It's
like
not
it because
really
of the pretty
hot.
colors.
Well, that's
Not
fine.
so much the information that I get out of the image, but the pretty colors are.
I know. I've turned my camera on in front of you and heard you go, "Ooh," from the background behind other people that were looking at it too.
I'm sitting here laughing because I used a infrared camera just a week ago, but it was to try to find water in a wall assembly because the Delta T I had was 0.
And so explain to people why you'd be able to find water with that then.
Yeah, well, we always try to separate understanding how energy and moisture flows, but they're always combined. It was that
Should I manage them with equal intensity?
you should.
Okay.
You should manage everything with equal intensity. Thank you, Steve.
Well,
No, it was the fact that if you have water in assembly, because of water in the assembly being having a higher capacity to hold heat, there's a lot of thermal lag. So if you're looking at an assembly that's cool, the wet spot might be warmer. If you're looking at in a warm environment where the water is, it could be cooler. So it is possible to pick up hidden water by using an infrared camera.
have you ever sprayed
You gotta have a lot.
building with cold water and then use the thermal camera
I
to
have
try
not.
and find a leak
I have not.
by seeing the intrusion?
Have you done that? That's a
we've
great
done
idea.
it. We've done that before.
Very cool. I've never actually done that.
You can see the kind of little spike and see where the water's coming in the wall.
Yeah.
But you just got to make sure it's like nice cool water coming out of the hose on a hot day.
Right.
And then you can pick up that delta in the camera.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in this situation, we were hoping that the morning sun striking the wall would help to bring out some patterns, but we didn't catch them that way.
Yeah. All right. So onward to hatred. Go ahead,
Pete, you
Jake.
want to? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's throw Jake on their bus.
It feels, and I could be wrong, it feels like the insulation industry is
Feeling.
lacking evolution. That the same insulation technologies that were available in the mid 90s in my market are the exact same technologies that are available. Now, there are some different versions of ICF. There are some different versions of spray foam. There are some sheet foams like Logic's or Halo's Subterra, Interra, the GPS, the graphite, polystyrene. There are some things like that are minor shifts. But I feel like if you look at the rest of the building industry during that same time period, there have been leaps and bounds of progress made. And if you look at the insulation industry, it's like, no. The people that work here are younger. That's what's different here. And it feels like there's probably some lag there. And maybe it's because we're not itching for it, because we're not complaining about it and saying, what do you got that's new? How do you solve this new problem for me? But even if you look at like the idea that now we're going to put insulation on the outside of the house that most people weren't doing back then, the evolution to the products that happen there are not the products. It's like fasteners. Like the reason that we can do that now is because somebody figured out how to fasten it, not because the insulation changed in any way. And I'm not saying that it has to change. It just does. It feels like there's a hole there for innovation.
Interesting, because some of the really, really high performance insulating materials we have come from other industries, like the aerospace industry.
Yep.
And it's always fascinated me that if you want to make an insulation work better, you just make the little pockets of air, which are your insulating pockets, smaller and smaller and smaller,
nano pocketing,
until you get to the point where you can't make those any smaller. And now the best thing is to not fill them with air, but to have them be empty.
Trapping. Yeah.
Right? A vacuum. So that to me has always been, oh, okay, I just try to make the pockets of gas smaller and smaller until I get to the point where, okay, no gas at all. And so you're eliminating all but radiant heat transfer.
A gas-free nano pocket zone.
That's a mouthful.
I also should note, like, I understand that there are products like Gutex that is a wood fiber insulation, and that you can now buy recycled blue jeans as insulation.
We've actually
those are not
used that in
widely available. I'm talking about that are widely available.
It's interesting. I'm going to knit the two of them together. So, because the minute you're
going to talk about blue jeans and knitting.
No, I'm going to talk about the aerospace industry and the lack of technology. It's like, it is pretty amazing to me that we can bring a spaceship through the atmosphere that can handle like thousands or hundreds of degrees of temperature difference, but we can't build a friggin' insulation that's more than R3 per inch. It's somewhat baffling, the disconnect there.
People aren't asking for it. People aren't demanding it. Energy's too cheap. Code hasn't progressed.
Yeah, something like that. Pete?
Well, those materials that we use for the aerospace industry are pretty bloody expensive.
They are.
When the delta T we're trying to manage is quite a bit less.
But I'm not asking to handle a delta of 1,000 degrees either.
Yeah.
So let's dumb that technology down a little bit, and for the benefit of what we're doing.
I do think that, the potential for the nanogel, which are these, incredibly tiny pockets with real high R value per inch, and the vacuum insulated panels, they're not really commercially available, but they are the big jump that we're going to see in terms of R value per inch.
So, on Star Wars, when the doors open and close, you hear like, right? So is that the hydraulic system of the door operation that we're hearing?
And why the hell couldn't they make it quieter?
Is it a pressure difference in the rooms that the door now has opened and exposed that pressure difference, so there's pressure relief between the rooms?
Well, seeing that in Star Trek, it was some guy going to make the sound. But
I'm just trying to understand what
it brings up a very valid point. That's fake, right?
It is?
It's fake news.
Wait, what?
Did you know that in the Star Trek...
Wars isn't real?
No, in Star Trek, they actually had to manually open and close those doors because there wasn't a technology that could open the doors that fast when somebody approached it.
Let's talk phase change materials real quick, too, while we're on
good one.
Space age technologies.
Right. Bringing back the band, putting the band back together.
That's like, why is that not more advanced than what it is? That seems like an easy one. Obviously, I don't understand the chemical engineering that goes behind. So we're all on the same page. Phase change materials absorb a temperature, hold that temperature, and then release it back as needed. They can be chemically tuned to do basically whatever you want. You could, in theory, we could have one that absorbs everything over 72 degrees Fahrenheit and then gives off when things get cooler than that. They use them in things like the space station, and a coffee mug that I have that's actually made in Columbia, Missouri, that you put whatever temperature you boil your coffee to in the morning and 2 or 3 minutes later, it's at a perfect drinking temperature, and it stays at that temperature for 5 or 6 hours. So it's like the opposite of the Yeti cup that you put your coffee in and then you can't drink because it's too hot. So it's like, if we could, and I've read multiple articles.
Technology came out of Missouri?
It came out of the university's engineering space, aeronautical space.
There's smart people in Missouri.
Oh, thanks. They're what we call readers.
Readers?
Readers.
Oh, readers.
They read.
Readers. Okay.
Old people like me, we think these are readers.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are readers. There you go.
But it seems like a perfectly legitimate use of the technology to just insulate our houses with it. And yet The first time I read about it was like 2014 or 2015, and I've never heard a thing since.
Well, they've been working on phase change drywall for an awfully long time, but it's never really ever made it to commercially available. But this is funny how many times I hark back to when I taught ninth grade science. The amount of energy that gets stored in the phase change of a material can be really huge. And that phase change is the latent capacity that's in the material. So it is a great way to store energy, but it's got to, the phase change temperature of the material has got to be tuned to the situation, like with the coffee cup. I guess it's just one of those things where the cost of that technology or that approach, it hasn't been justified yet by our
Is it
our current
that, or
system.
do you think? So, many years ago, I had this ongoing discussion with a very smart gentleman, and his position was that certain systems have limits, right? Like he used the internal combustion engine as his example. That we're never going to see a car that can go 100 miles an hour or 100 miles per gallon because the system is just not capable of that. You have to switch to a different system.
Yeah, interesting.
In that most systems have limits. So is it the way that we insulate our houses that are the limits, or is it the material that is the limit? Like what is it that's kind of stalling us in the thermal world?
It's interesting you talk about sort of getting boxed in by the system with the combustion engine, because I've always thought that if we could heat people rather than spaces, then you could drop the background temperature down a lot for heating and up a lot for cooling.
So I can sit in my living room with a heated blanket and keep the temperature in the room at 65.
Yeah, the idea being it's either task heating and cooling or
Point of use.
point of use. Exactly.
Well, isn't that how they used to do it in the olden days? Right? Heat up rocks in a fire, and then you put the rocks in this bed underneath this big down blanket to warm up the bed, and then you slept in this nice warm bed.
And it's funny because the Center for Built Environment.
I remember my dad.
How did we not go there immediately when we're talking about
maybe
heating
you're
up?
into beating up on Peter's age, but I have respect for my elders, and I'm not going
And
to
the more elder they get, the more respect
they get, the more respect I
He
get.
has a grand amount of respect for
But,
you.
Holy smokes.
I do remember my dad always talking about, like, what he remembers, the story that he always would tell. I remember waking up as a little kid. Everybody ran down next to the stove, and that's where we got dressed because it was the warmest place in the house. But,
yeah, heating whole buildings is, you can only take that approach so far.
Right.
If we can figure out how to heat just the occupants, then the building can drift quite a bit more. Center for the Built Environment out in Berkeley, California, has been doing work on, heating and cooling stations. And it's interesting that the two industries they're servicing the most are housing, but more importantly is the automobile. I mean, the automobile now has individual comfort for driver and passenger, heated steering wheels, heated seats,
Front and
ventilated
rear.
seats.
Yeah.
All that technology has come from the Center for the Built Environment.
I think you should open up a new center in the Peter Yost Center for Personal Thermal Enhancement.
You think so, huh?
Yeah.
Because I'm a very comfortable guy when you get down to it.
Boy, that's
And so,
all right, back to old jokes.
Okay, real quick.
We're done
I
with
think that we've
respect.
talked about this before, but just in case, I recently was asking my family if the house that we've lived in for now almost 2 years felt like home yet. And they all kind of agreed that it's starting to really feel like home. My daughter was the first to say, "Oh yeah, it feels like home." Well, she's the youngest. She had the least experience at the last house. So then I went around individually and said, like, what do you like the most about this house? My 15-year-old said, I like the fact that every room is the same temperature. And I was like, I just got a high schooler to talk about thermal comfort unprompted. How in the hell did that happen?
Parent of the Year, Jake Bruton.
very cool.
But I was like, doesn't that, I think that I can take that as every room is the same temperature.
Yeah.
We don't have we're upstairs, so it's going to be hot, or we're in the basement, so it's going to be cold sort of thing. And I was like super proud of that.
So I think one of the key takeaways from this is that we have talked as much about thermal comfort as we have energy efficiency. And, that was not how I approached building when I was a builder. I was like, well, how much insulation can we get in the wall? That was in terms of energy efficiency, not in terms of, hey, are the occupants going to be comfortable? And it's not a given that the best things for thermal comfort are also necessarily the most effective for energy efficiency. So we can, every time we get to kill those two birds with the same stone, that's way more important than just one or the other. How's that for a bit of a wrap up, Steve?
Well, no, we didn't do cons. We got to run through the cons right now.
They're called hates.
Or hates.
Remember,
yes.
with love and hate. I already did my hate. My hate was the lack of evolution.
Oh, that's right. You did do that. Did you do a hate, Pete?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Was I here?
Yeah, you were here, but I did.
Okay.
Go to the YouTube video and watch Pete's face when he said, "Yeah, I did that."
Do people give off clues when they're lying?
I think
no.
I think dementia is there's a certain level of dementia setting in.
You won't let me tell my favorite joke. I can wrap up that way.
Go ahead. No, I'm not. If you say Rose, I'm getting out of here.
We're done.
I'm in.
No, I'm not hearing that joke again.
We're done.
It is the
Stay tuned, folks.
Go ahead, tell it.
No.
No, because you intrigued everybody.
How can I tell it when you're giving the punch?
I'll block.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I'm going to even step away from.
Nobody heard him.
Two couples that are having dinner together. The women know each other. The men don't. After dinner, the women go off to the kitchen to make a pot of coffee. That leaves these two old geezers looking at each other like, what the hell are we going to talk about? And the one guy goes, oh, hey, yeah. My wife and I went to see a movie the other night. And the first guy's like, so relieved they have something to talk about. He goes, oh, yeah, what was the movie? And the second guy goes, oh, geez. Oh, hey, what's that flower that's red and it smells real good and it has thorns? And the first guy goes, Rose? He goes, that's it. Hey, Rose, what was the name of that movie we saw? You're not old enough to appreciate it yet, Steve.
I get the joke.
I get it.
I get it. I don't want to.
You don't like it. That's the thing.
I don't want to get it, but I get the joke.
Good for you.
Right.
I told my grandmother a joke one time when she was getting fairly old, and she went, "That's nice." I don't think I've ever had a more hurtful reaction to me trying
really
to make,
listening to
make
joke.
Someone laugh.
I think she was just like, I think Jake just mumbled a whole bunch of stuff, so I might as well just go with it.
My own grandmother going, "That's nice." That one hurt. I can still remember that one.
Take us home, please.
All righty, everybody. So that is it. That is the wrap on our little 4 podcast series of Love and Hate.
Wasn't very heated.
It was not very heated. We did throw around a little bit of a hatred, but we didn't get mean about it. So we're on to bigger and better things. We're going to come back at you with some other great topics, but that wraps up this series. So go hit that, smash that subscribe button. And continue to join us. Until next time, I'm signing off. Jake?
Thanks for listening.
Bye for now.